Yes.
So, if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I don't understand, the crazy fanatics, zealots or sicari, and the management are actually two separate entities. Okay.
Yes.
So, who exactly did the Josephus blame the fall of Judea upon?
Of course, he was himself the management. He was a commander of northern region, Galilee. So he doesn't blame himself, but he claims that Sicari, the zealots, were sort of attacking him, creating all this mess, and by the time, toward the end of the war, they're in full control and they're killing. I mean, sort of, he describes horrendous bloodbath in Jerusalem caused by them. But in any case, there was no, I mean, this is clearly one of the terrible pictures of terrible excess which caused by religious wars are terrible. Not just when it's Jews involved, whomever. When Arabs are involved, when Christians are involved, when Hindus are involved. In religious war tend to be terrible things. So the wars which are not fought by regular governmental entities tend to be terrible. Sort of, if two governments fight, they could somehow impose, however cruel, an order on their armies. That was not the case. It was, I mean, again, if you, like for somebody who is interested in Jewish history, this is, by the way, a must. This is not an optional book, because it is the, I mean, think about it. He was the only Jewish historian till modern times. So he wrote another book, by the way, called Antiquities of the Jews, which starts from Moses and actually before Moses, and yes, and gives it. It's less personal. This is the book which he lived. This is the book which sort of, great degree, his apology. Apologia for Greek doesn't mean I apologize, I explain myself. This is self-explanation again. And he's a good writer. He's not a great writer. Josephus is not Herodotus or Thucydides, but he's very good. So, it's not going to be wasting your time. For many years in England, that was literally, he was viewed as next to the Bible book. In 17th century and 18th century England, every educated person, pretty much, would have a volume of Josephus. Whether they read it or not, it's another story. It's, again, every educated person would have the Bible. But they had it. It was very widely distributed. The translation which they used is still available. It's very flowery. I do not recommend it. I do recommend either this or for Antiquities of the Jews, it's Thackeray's translation in Loeb Classical Library, but it's unbelievably expensive. So that might be. I mean, if you want, you could afford, but it's going to cost you $200 to collect all the votes. So, I mean, this is going to cost you, whatever, $10. It says $18, but I think it's like $12, I forget, on Amazon. So.
Just about the timeline. So the events of Bar Kokhba, the Bar Kokhba revolt was?
135.
Is it Tiberius who actually?
No.
Andrea, right? So, and Jesus Christ kind of,
Around 30. That's Tiberius.
Right, so that's kind of, so that he,
Bar Kokhba for sure never met Jesus Christ. That I assure. Yes.
So that Jesus Christ's life seems to be fit into the first.
No. 30. First war is 66 to 70. Much later, we will get to it. We will get to Jesus Christ. Trust me, I cannot, absolutely cannot talk about Western civilization without mentioning Jesus Christ, no matter what HR thinks. Huh? But we're not ready. I have to give, you see, I cannot say, well, there was this Jew called Jesus Christ till we talked about the Jews. And I'm not done talking about the Jews because we didn't talk about Hebrew scriptures at all. I just gave you a historical, again, one of the things, I have to cover everything in one course. So first I had to mention the Jews and say they were not liked. Did you get it? They were not liked by anyone. Still not liked by anyone, but except me. But they were not liked. They fought. They lost. Right? They had the book. So we'll see what their book is next time. Right? And in some sense, I was very tempted to teach this section very differently. I was very tempted to start in the year, just this lecture, my plan till about a week ago was to start it in the year, say, 53, when some middle-aged Jew comes to Athens and goes to the hill of Areopagus and talks to the philosophers about one God. His name was Paul of Tarsus. So that's how, as it were, the ancient world found about the Bible and the Jews and things like that. It starts with literally this speech of Paul. But then I said, well, but they wouldn't know who Jews were. So I had to, or they would have a wrong, they would say Jews are like Boris here. They're sort of programmers. They were not programmers. They were not, they were not part, again, you have this notion of a Jew nowadays as a person who works, for A9 or Google, or, hedge fund or whatever. But you do not have a notion of Jews as a small peasant nation, which sort of unknown. It's not Israel, because Israel is a powerful and no longer peasant nation. It was a literally unknown. To fully understand, when I say that by 316 the Bible becomes the book of the empire, is amazing, because these war people, it's like, I don't know, I have no words from what, it's like some small tribe in South America. They were not visible. They were not known. They were not part of the intellectual, universe. Nobody was talking to them. They were not talking to them. Nobody cared about them. And then suddenly they become, and remain till today, at the center of history. Of course, they thought they were at the center of history before, but nobody noticed. Right? Like they clearly believed that they were center of history when Babylonians came. But Babylonians didn't think they were the center of history, so they said, march to Babylon. And they did. Right? And by the way, we will read in the Bible, this is a major theme of Hebrew scriptures. That, well, it's not as simple as might appear to be. But I want to send this message that these were not powerful people. They were not prominent people. And somehow they become and remain till today central. Even during the Middle Ages, when nobody really meets Jews, they live in these ghettos, they loan money, whatever they do, but they still remain, at least mentally at the center of the universe. Everybody always thinks about them. Right? Even in Russia, where they never saw a Jew. There were no Jews. Right? They always talked about Jews. It was impossible not, they become at the center of Western civilization, whether they like it or not, in some sense. And we have to understand it, because we literally cannot quite figure out what is going on now unless we figure out how it happened and what happened. What is their unique position? So that's, but it's hard to understand, because another thing which I have to warn you, I'm going to be talking about Hebrew scriptures, but there is no such thing as Hebrew scriptures in the fundamental sense, because I'm not going to attempt to give you a presentation of how Hebrew scriptures are understood by rabbinical Judaism. I'm not competent, but even if I am competent, it's dramatically outside of our story. Right? So, if you want to know rabbinical Judaism, go to your rabbi, because in some sense it's outside of the story. Even today I sort of indicated this remarkable thing that sort of most non-Jews assume automatically that, well, the Old Testament, it's like the Bible minus New Testament. You just cut it. It's not so. It's not so, because, even fundamental notions such as what happens with you when you die are right now radically different between at least rabbinical Judaism and any branch of Christianity. So now, Christianity denies reincarnation. No, nothing is written. You have to understand that Judaism is not the religion of written Torah. It's the religion of oral Torah, which supersedes, which is above. Right? This is so. How do I know? I didn't. For years, believe it or not, I was as confused as everybody else, and thought that, Judaism is just Christianity minus New Testament. But one of my students became a prominent Hasidic rabbi and professor of Jewish studies at one of the major Israeli universities. So when he came to visit me, I had to face this reality. He did not believe anything I thought he believed. I'm not criticizing him. I'm just saying that Judaism is not what most people outside believe. It's a very complicated system. It's thousands of years, 2,000 years of separate parallel development with very different authority system, mind systems. It's just I'll try to show some of it, but it's just so little I can. I recommend, when Michael and I taught, I suggested just read random sections of Talmud. I think doing that is a wonderful thing, because it just shows you how different it is. I'm not telling you go and read all of the Talmud. It's like that. No, it's not like that. It's like that. So it's hard. By the way, if you do want, it's on sale now. Not at Amazon. Believe it or not, the cheapest place to buy Newsner, very respectable Jewish scholar, translation of Babylonian Talmud, is a website called christianbooks.com, which I think is rather funny. But if you have space, it costs $180 for like 20 big volumes. I don't know. It's a huge bargain, but I don't think you will be able to do it. And since all of it is available online, sort of periodic looking at it, for all Jews and non-Jews, by the way. For Jews, for sure, I think they should familiarize themselves with Talmud. For non-Jews, I think they also, because, there's people living in the midst of us. Let's find out what they are. I'm not trying to say there are some gruesome passages. No, it's different. It's not, it's a legal document which discusses all kind of interesting things, like if you have a wooden leg, are you allowed to go out on a Saturday? This is serious. You understand the problem? It's a tough problem. Could you carry something? How big a thing could you carry? Is wooden leg on this side or that side of the legal fence? So, by the way, I'm not making fun. I'm just saying it's illegal. There are elements of what Christians would call theology there, but absolutely minimal, invisible. There are elements of what is known as Haggadah. There's two parts. Halakha, the legal stuff, the wooden leg, and Haggadah, wisdom. Haggadah is very small in Talmud. And this is just snippets. Somebody just says something. You have to sieve through lots, and then you get very, very, very little. But it's a legal it's a very complicated legal system, totally different from what is known in the West. Sort of the Roman law is very different from Talmudic law, but it's an ancient thing. So it's good to know. But I'm not going to lecture on it. No, Tanakh is this. This is Tanakh. Tanakh means the Bible. Talmud. That big. It's about wooden leg. And what kind of things women could put in, and how to take a bath, and whatever. Very important stuff, but not this. If you want, there are, of course, Jewish editions of Tanakh, and depending on your persuasion, if you want a very highly orthodox one, there's Art Scroll Tanakh. That's the name of the translation of the Hebrew Scriptures. Or for less orthodox, there is Jewish Publication Society. And for raving liberals, like Michael, something like Oxford Jewish Study Bible. Pretty good. Sorry that, but you don't wear yarmulke, so, which clearly makes you a raving lunatic from, legal point of view. But, sort of, there is a spectrum. But Art Scroll is very good in spite of being extremely orthodox. It's just a different angle, and it will not at all have historical critical notes but it would have lots of quotes from Rambam and Rashi. These are great Hebrew scholars. So, it's not. But for most of you right now, in terms of becoming civilized, what I recommend is Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha. By the way, if you read it carefully, and we will talk about how to read it later, I claim you will become a better Jew. And if you then want to switch to, it's a good middle ground source. Right? So it's and by the way, at least one Jewish scholar participated in the revision. So, it's relatively speaking ecumenical. There are no Muslim scholars. But after all, there's no intersection in terms of scriptures. with Muslims. So this was my sort of recommendation. I do recommend that, whatever you say, well, but I'm an atheist. Again, if you want to be an informed atheist, you should read the Bible. You cannot, otherwise you are, like if you want to be informed believer, you still should read a little bit of Voltaire or Karl Marx or whatever. Otherwise, you're uninformed. So, plus there's lots of racist stuff there too. So, no. Sadly enough, Karl Marx is not racy at all. And he has very little, there are some books, if you want to read Karl Marx, I'll mention him at the end of the course. There are some wonderful books by him. The 18th of Brumaire of Louis Napoleon is probably his greatest book. But no, people always think it's Das Kapital, but it's not so. At least it's much more interesting than Das Kapital. But again, I hope to see you in 2 weeks, and you will all know both Hebrew Scriptures and New Testament inside out. In the original languages, yeah. Well, there are questions? Or?
Well, I just have a comment that I don't know what the name of it is, but there are multiple websites that have parallel translations of all the different editions, so you can read, this version and that version, and see how they differ.
Yeah, you just Google Bible.
Yes. Yes, I'm yet to meet a person who learned to read anything using the website. It's not, it goes for Homer, it goes for, so I think that sort of this idea of taking a book and reading it, it's actually a good idea for something as serious as this. I use computers, by the way. So you could say, well, I want to judge different translations. Yes, but very few of you are capable of. Yeah. As a companion, yes, and again, there are some great translation. I did mention the authorized version, which is indeed, as T.S. Eliot said, as a monument of English prose, and somebody said, yes, it's a monument over the tomb of Christianity. Meaning the moment you move the Bible into a monument thing, it's so, but it's a great, I have multiple editions of the authorized version. If those of you who are interested in reading authorized version, which is indeed a monument of English prose, there are 2 editions which I have to recommend. One is by Norton. It's in 2 volumes, Old Testament, and 2nd volume, New Testament and Apocrypha. It has very extensive notes by literary scholars. It's not a theological edition, but edition of the Bible as literature. I have it in my office. You're welcome to stop by and take a look. It is quite wonderful, but the language is 1611 language, nothing I could do about it. The other edition, which is quite remarkable, is what is known as Cambridge Paragraph Bible. It's an edition of the authorized version with modernized spelling, just the spelling, which helps a lot. And it does another remarkable thing. It gets rid as much as possible of chapters and verses. One of the bane of people who are reading the Bible, this is why Americans, especially like our Southern Baptist friends, don't know the Bible because they read chapter and verse. Nobody wrote chapter and verse. Chapter and verse is not a unit. at least not a regional unit, since the notion of a chapter appeared in 13th century. Archbishop Stephen Langton introduced them. And the notion of a verse is very late. It was introduced in 16th century by great French printer Stephanus. Etienne in French. Stephanus becomes Etienne. They're very useful for reference, but make it entirely impossible to read. And then it created this terrible habit in sort of memorizing verses. And then the verse is not, okay, from theological point of view, it's not inspired. From literary point of view, it's not written by authors. Don't write verses. They write books. Right? Moreover, verses couldn't be even visible in the original text since they didn't even have periods or word breaks. It was, so you have to learn to read it as a text. We will be talking about it later, but the important thing, if you decide to peek into a Bible, remember it's a text, and you have to read it as a story. And whatever I told you about reading books such as Homer applies 100%. Like when you read Iliad, what should you absolutely believe? That Zeus is there. You say, but I'm not in ancient Greek. It doesn't matter. When you read Homer, Zeus is there, Aphrodite is there, they're part of the story. Now, when you read Hebrew scriptures, Hebrew God is there. You have to, you don't have to think in terms of, I believe it. Never mind the belief. He's the part of the narrative. You have to see it. By the way, the speaking she-donkey in Numbers is the similar part of the narrative. You shouldn't question, donkeys do not speak. It doesn't matter whether they speak. They speak in the Numbers. You have to learn to read the book. Sort of part of the problem is that, you have to learn to, in some ridiculous way, I have to say, enjoy the story. If you don't enjoy the story, you don't get it. You say, but isn't there a deeper meaning? Maybe yes, maybe not. But first, get the story. Right? It's, it's if you don't feel the pleasure, and again, it's a complicated text, but it's, another thing, it's large portion of Hebrew scriptures is poetry. It's a different poetry from Homer. We'll be talking about Hebrew poetry. But again, you have to understand that you're reading poetry. So you say, but did it happen like that? Never mind, it's the mountains skipped like lambs. That's my favorite example. Did they skip like lambs? No, probably not. Right? But it's poetry. It's clearly written by people whose view of the world is fundamentally different. You could come up with a scientific worldview of people who wrote the Bible. What did they see? They saw a firmament which covers the earth. What is above the firmament? Anybody knows? Water. Exactly right. What happens when you open the rain? Too much flood. That's how it happens. You say, but we sent people there. There's no firm. Never mind. It's not. It's not about. This is not a book on astronomy. There was no concept of astronomy. Greeks and Babylonians did have it, but not Hebrews. They were borrowing whatever the common astronomical convention of surrounding cultures, Babylonians, Assyrians, Persians, whomever were around, and it's a small nation. So they learned whatever thing, and that's the framework they describe. They were not investigating the stars. They were not sending missions to Pluto. So it's not an astronomical book. It's It's not even a historical book in the sense, not even in a modern sense, but not even in the sense of Thucydides. Because as we will observe when we talk about historical parts, that the authors of all these books do the following thing. They take a bunch of stories and then they put it in a canvas which has a certain meaning. Usually very simple meaning. These Jews, they start doing bad things. Therefore, punishment comes. So they start doing better. Things are going better. Then they start doing bad things. I'm not making it up. There is a pattern there. So the stories, of course, are different, and some of them are wonderful, some of them are frightening, as we shall see. I mean, there are parts of the historical books of the Bible which I wouldn't recommend that you read to your children, but Judges specifically. But it's not a historical book. It's a book with a message about how the creator of the universe picked a totally uninteresting bunch of wandering Arameans. I mean, all the words which I used come from the Bible. So, I mean, your father was a wandering Aramean. And yes.
A question about the three sectors of Jews before the loss of
Yes.
the war. In particular, again, about the third one, the peculiar Essenes.
Yes.
How does a sect survive if its main thing is that there's no intercourse with females, and also it's really hard, it takes 2 years to join?
How did Benedictine orders survive? These are Christian monks, which do not have sex, and it takes 2 years to join. No, I mean, this is, they exist now. I could introduce you to some. I mean, they exist. People join. Yes, you're required to find volunteers. But I mean, Benedictines are not the only group like that.
But were they sizable at that time?
He says sizable. He says they're everywhere, and blah, blah, blah. What do we know? But were Benedictines sizable? Yeah, they cultivated most of vineyards in Europe. I would say they were sizable. The Benedictine monasticism transformed Europe in a very simple way. I mean, planting vineyards, converting the soil from unusable to highly usable, and then they invent distilling. Very important invention. At least for a Russian, cannot. So,
Invented it? I thought Arabs had it before.
no.
Polish.
Arabs don't drink.
Well, before, maybe before Muhammad.
We know next to nothing of Arabs before Muhammad. No. Leave Benedictines, their great discovery. Not just them. I mean, of course, Carthusians, the drinking people should know Chartreuse, this great green or yellow drink. These are Carthusian monks, the strictest monastic order. In the church, they invented this delectable concoction. Tried one day. What?
You have a monastic life, right?
They mostly sold it. So they don't drink it. This is the problem. They had to support themselves. So, but they would drink on Sundays, yes. But on weekdays, they would typically drink wine. Again, French, Italian, this part of the world, everybody drinks wine every day. It's not. In any case, I hope to meet you again. We have a shrinking numbers, but well, whatever. Thank you, Nick, for the encouraging thought. I will keep till at least one person. As long as Michael is there, we'll keep going.